With this show.
Right. Ain't wasting no time. We're getting straight to it.
Who thinks there should be?
Straight to it.
Okay, all right, there we go.
Good answer. Well, it is the top of the hour now, 9 p.m. here in New York City. We are just seconds away from tonight's only vice presidential debate between Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Democratic Governor Tim Walz.
That's right. It is also
J.D.
potentially,
Vance
if you haven't
is
noticed,
going to have a lot of making up to do.
Debate we will see before
he going in here
day.
as the underdog.
Election day now just 35 days away, 5 weeks.
We have kind of set the table here on what people will be looking at and what we'll all be talking about in a little while. We will have in-depth analysis once the debate concludes here on NBC. But tonight's event is hosted by CBS News in their studio in New York, just a few blocks from here.
Yeah, and as the last debate was between the running mates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, there's no audience in there tonight. So each candidate is going to have 2 minutes for their answers, and then there's a rebuttal. And the moderators have said, Lester, there will be some fact-checking, but they're really counting on the candidates to fact-check each other.
And as we noted, unlike the last debate, microphones will not be muted, but the network says they reserve the right to mute the candidates. So that'll be an interesting process as they go along.
Okay, the vice presidential debate about to be on. Let's go to CBS Network Studios, West 57th, here in the heart of Manhattan, and watch this debate.
Presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right
Why
to
they
mute
got
the
this
candidates'
pose like
microphones
they
to
both
maintain
like-
decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East.
See stuff
Margaret.
about the
Thank you, Nora.
being closed.
Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight.
Well, now
let's
that's
keep in mind where this started.
unprepared question,
October
for
7th,
sure.
Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack.
J.D.
But what's
Vance trying to pull a
fundamental
page
here
out of
is that
Kamala's
steady leadership
book.
is going to matter.
He's looking
It's
at
clear,
Tim,
and the world
and
saw
all
it on that
Tim
debate
doing is
stage a
talking.
few
He ain't
weeks
even saying
ago.
nothing crazy.
A nearly 80-year-old
He's looking
Donald
like
Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment.
funny.
But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous.
Oh, shit, he
His
bashing
chief
Trump.
of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the
don't
White
even know
House.
if he answered
Now, the
the
person
question for
closest to
real.
them,
He didn't
Donald
answer the
Trump,
question.
said he's unfit for the highest office.
said-
That was
she
Senator
said,
Vance.
what would you
we've
do in
seen
the conference
of
room, I
Vice
believe,
President
if not
Harris
answering
is
the
we've seen
question.
steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to be
Not
able to
answering the
draw on the
question, bro.
coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies
J.D.
see
Vance is pulling
Donald
a
Trump
Kamala, just
turn
staring at
towards
him.
Vladimir Putin,
Kamala did it
turn
already,
towards,
bro. You look
North
fake.
Korea. When we start to see that type of fickleness
don't
around
look
holding
natural
the
at
coalitions
all.
together,
It don't look
we
natural.
will stay committed. And as the vice president said today is, we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same
That was perfect
question.
timing. I wonder if
Would
there
you
was a timer up
support
there. You must
or
got a timer.
oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are.
Nigga,
I was
you've been
raised in a
talking every
working-class
day.
family. My mother required food assistance for
Bro.
periods of her life. My grandmother required
If we
Social
know
Security
anybody
help to
from
raise
this,
me,
it's J.D.
and she raised
Vance.
me in
He
part
talks
because my
the
mother
most.
struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my
But
early
it's
life.
understood the
I went
least.
to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq.
this
and
is
so I
what you're
stand
doing with
here
your 2 minutes?
asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country.
Is this
for the
even a
American
good
dream that
idea?
made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried
know if this
about
is
the
a good
chaos
idea.
in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House,
Sorry,
the
I'm
American
mad.
dream is
Got
going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence.
At least Tim talked about the damn
bombing
line. In some
Iran,
semblance,
which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near
JD
US
gave
troops,
him an opportunity to have the last word. He should have did that. He should just
Donald Trump wrote it off.
Tim Walz going to have the last word.
Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Why do they say that as
we have
if
a lot
that's
to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead, and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable.
Katrina killed almost 1,400 people. So if it's 100 now, of course this is terrible.
Last photograph ever taken of them
but
because the roof collapsed. And
that's a big difference in the number for her to say that.
Our hearts go out to those innocent people. Our prayers go out to them. And we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response to save as many lives
What was that?
Possible,
Oh, shit.
and of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change.
Nobody said drives all.
Just for the sake of argument,
that's
so we're
not what people say about climate change.
Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together to all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America. And
how does that correlate?
So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats
She's not even addressing. He's not even addressing. She said Trump called it a hoax.
And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States.
Trump called it a hoax.
Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance. Your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens.
This is annoying.
Massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor,
he didn't answer the question.
Do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen.
Like,
it was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. But Border Patrol say this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents. Detection for drugs. DOJ money to speed up.
Nobody's going to answer any questions. They just keep getting their talking points off.
But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no. Told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature.
If that bill got
passed, through the executive
Trump wouldn't have shit to run on.
Options to do this.
All he would say is the economy is bad.
4 years to do this.
I'm going to make it better. I'm going to make it better. Everything's bad. They're terrible people.
Big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
J.D. Vance is on record
Senator,
talking about
Trump. The question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules.
This is getting egregious. Nobody's answering questions.
It has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that.
She's the vice president. She can't do anything. What are y'all talking about?
Fentanyl coming into our country.
Why do they keep saying that?
Now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Damn.
Look, we fixed this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this.
Good phrasing.
Talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this.
Whoa, yep.
That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Lankford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first.
knows that hurt.
The governor has made the point.
He knows that didn't look good.
As a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up.
Governor, he had to bring it back. I think you do want to solve this problem.
It is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable. Go back and forth on this one. It becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Right. Temporary protected status.
Well, that was a fact check.
Thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration.
Y'all, the moderator, shut his ass up.
Thank you, Senator, for describing
Turn his mic off.
We have so much to get to.
Turn his mic off.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We want to have
has
not been on the books.
Y'all said y'all could turn their mic off. Yep, y'all turned the mics off. The mics off. Thank you.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
They did say they wasn't going to fact check, so that's kind of messed up that they did that.
Has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics.
That was messed up.
Vice President
but
Harris
the fact that he was upset that he got fact checked is crazy.
For manufacturing.
He was so y'all said y'all wasn't going to fact check because I know I'm up here lying.
Says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out
you guys
there
said you weren't
one
is
is talking
check.
about this housing
now,
issue.
All the conservatives
one thing is there's
they
3
fact checked
million new houses
after
proposed
you
under
said they
this
wasn't going to fact
with
check.
down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere.
I do wish they didn't do that because now they're going
to where you're at.
And then making sure that the things
you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that.
Should not be up there ready to lie because they said they weren't going to fact check.
But it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis. Prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit. We have one in Minnesota. Reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit per small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago. He said, "You're rich as hell. I'm going to give you a tax cut." He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it.
Is using the words that Kamala used in her debate, bro.
To enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%.
She's a VP. She hasn't done
drive the cost
shit.
of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago.
Anybody that buys into this literally doesn't even care about politics or civics.
Tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans.
Why are they saying
now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts, but if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Right. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted.
Come on, Tim.
Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
It's hard to argue with
Governor,
that.
you say trust the experts, but those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that.
We do.
They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy.
We can't afford that. Stop it. We can't afford that.
I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home.
You can't afford that.
I love them very much. I hope they're in bed right now.
That's why we import goods.
So many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the body bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts.
It sounds amazing,
to
but
common
we can't
sense
afford
wisdom,
it.
which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address
And that's
that? I mean,
one of
voters
the-
say they trust Donald Trump on the economy
That's one of the
more.
downsides.
Why?
If you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things
I'm
overseas.
looking a little
but I
rocky right
understand
here,
that,
but
look,
I get it.
We
It's
produce
a
soybeans and
tough
corn.
question.
We need to have fair trading
it's-
partners. That's something
that's
that we
a tough
believe
question,
in.
so
I
you
think
love-
the thing that
you looking
most
too good right here,
concerns
right
me
now.
on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens.
I don't like how they acting like Kamala
raised
was the
by a
president.
woman
I don't
who
like
would
that.
sometimes go into medical
They keep
debt
acting like
so that she
Kamala
could
was
put
president
food
for
on
the past
table
4 They
in our
keep trying to
household.
put
I know
Biden
what
on
it's like
Kamala.
to not be able to afford the things
She
that you
doesn't
need
have
to
any
afford.
power.
We can do so much better. To all of you watching,
But that's
we can
strategic
get
for
back to an
them
America
because
that's affordable
they can
again.
put
We just gotta
Biden
get
on
back to
Kamala
common
because
sense
she's
economic
his VP.
principles.
I hope we have a
And it
conversation
sounds
on
good.
health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you, Margaret.
Oh, that look
We have a
bad.
lot to get to.
Oh,
ahead,
that looked bad.
Gentlemen,
that looked bad,
on many
Tim.
topics.
That looked
But
bad.
right now, I want to talk
That looked
about
bad. It looked
personal
bad.
qualifications.
What if you know the
vice
facts?
president is often the last
different
voice
conversation.
the
But
president
that looked
hears
bad.
before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you
Walz
said you
is
were in
way
Hong
more.
Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy? Your 2 minutes.
Well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I
you
joined the
answer the
National Guard at
question, bro?
17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12
Does
years.
that answer what she said?
And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits.
Is this
And then
answering
the
the
people of
question?
Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made,
up in
the
the
difference
rhetoric.
it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016,
I'm glad she doubled back. I don't even know nothing about that incident, but that looked bad. That looked terrible.
And you said he could be America's Hitler.
I
know you've said, you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Good question.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open.
I did not know about
sometimes,
that
of course,
Tim
I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open
question.
about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was
But
wrong,
you
first
said
of all,
it
because
was
I
before
believe
2020,
some of the media stories that turned out to be
mind.
dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews.
So why when Kamala do it, y'all get mad?
The American people where
y'all mad at her
flip-flopping
when she changed her mind.
Out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing.
Got names.
A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky,
sounds so terrible.
Hadley Duvall,
it sounds
a
terrible.
12-year-old child,
Any woman would not
raped and
want that
impregnated
to
by
happen
her
to another
stepfather.
woman.
Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their
I don't like how they keep
healthcare.
acting
But
like
look,
women getting
this is
9-month
not what- if you
abortions
don't
out
know
of
Amanda or
choice.
Hadley,
I hate
you
how they
soon
keep
will.
acting like
Their
that.
Project 2025 is going to have a registry.
Stop
of
bringing up
pregnancies.
Project
It's going to
2025.
make it more
God.
difficult, if not impossible, to
Oh,
get
I'm so sick of them
contraception
doing that. It's
and
so
limit access, if
irritating.
not eliminate access
It's
to
so
infertility
irritating they
treatments.
keep bringing up
For so
Project
many of you out there
2025.
listening, me
They're
included,
not owning it.
infertility
Stop bringing
treatments
it
are why I
up.
have a child. That's nobody else's business. But those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington.
That's stupid.
That's not
because
how
people
this
that
works.
don't want
This is
abortions don't have
basic
to
human
get
right.
it.
We
That's
have
stupid. I don't even understand that logic.
Mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about
Damn.
health
I
care.
wonder
In
if that's
Minnesota,
true.
we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest
Mortality
sense of
rate
the
in
word.
Texas
I
is
want us to support
skyrocketing
fertility
due to
treatments. I want us to
pregnancies.
make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it
Outpacing
easier for young
across the
families
nation.
to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's
It rose
so much that we can do
56%
on the
after
public
the
policy
overturning
front
of Roe v.
just to
Wade.
give women more options. Now, of course,
crazy.
Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And
That's on
California has
NBC.
a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona.
It doesn't
and the
matter.
proper way to handle
That's
this, as
stupid.
messy
Let
as
the
democracy
person
sometimes
decide.
is
To say
let
these states get
voters
to choose
make
it is
these
crazy to
decisions.
me.
Let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big,
No, it doesn't.
a very
It makes
diverse,
no
and let's be
sense.
honest,
It makes no
sometimes
sense.
a very,
Because
very
if you
messy
don't want an
and
abortion,
divided
don't
country.
get one. That's all
Governor,
it
would you
comes
like to
down
respond
to.
and also
Stop
answer the
making
question about
people not have
restrictions?
that choice.
Yeah,
That
well,
makes no
the
sense
question
at
got asked
all.
when Donald Trump
I can't
made the
even believe
accusation
they
it
can
wasn't
let
true
the
about
states
Minnesota.
decide.
Well,
That's
let me tell you
ridiculous.
about this idea that there's diverse
If you don't want it,
states.
don't get it.
There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state.
Cigarettes is
Because of
legal
that,
everywhere.
She had to
If you don't want it, you
travel
don't get
a long
it.
distance to North Carolina to try and get her care.
Oh, this is the girl that
Amber
died.
Thurman died.
She died.
In that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights,
Is in the
as
hands of
basic
everybody
as the
else.
right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance
That's crazy.
had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today.
That's crazy.
That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is
and
trying
J.D.
to figure
Vance
out
don't
how
even
to get the
sound-
political
they on
right of
two
this.
different
I agree
pages.
with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world.
Talk about flip-flopping.
My question is, Why have you changed your
Talk
position?
about flip-flopping.
Well, Nora, first of all, I never
Flip-flopping.
supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see
That's
an
funny
unplanned
because
pregnancy as something that's going to
Donald Trump has never been popular amongst people. He only won because of the Electoral College.
Earn people's trust back, and that's why Donald Trump and I
he
are
ain't
committed
did nothing to earn it back
pro-family
besides
policies, making child care more
start a coup.
accessible, making fertility
Attempt a
treatments more
coup, rather.
accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that, and that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedom for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all,
looks bad
Governor,
to
I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive.
That
there are a
looks
lot
bad
of
on
people
their
who
part.
should still be alive.
Now, what you
and
gonna
I
say about
certainly
it?
wish that she was.
What you gonna say about it?
Maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because
that's why they got to let Tim respond, because that's not true. That's not how that shit works. I hope Tim explains it so
because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience.
They got to let Tim respond to
be a big
that.
and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Yeah. Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their health care decisions.
Tim, you're not going to explain
it? And the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point.
Explain it, Tim.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me. What was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things work best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care.
Oh my God.
So hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says.
So tell them.
They fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
This is fucking terrible. Okay, y'all. So, okay. I may not have this to a full T. That looked bad. That what they're talking about is is basically palliative care if you have a botched abortion or a baby that's born that won't survive. That's what that's about. It's not like it's a botched abortion, let me just kill it because I don't want it. That's not how it works. And I cannot believe Tim refused to explain it. Either he does not understand it or he didn't think that the people would receive it in the way, and it took too much explaining. But honestly, I don't think it's that hard to explain. What they're talking about with the people dying or killing a baby after it's born is basically if the baby is born and won't survive, or you tried to get an abortion and it went wrong and it was born but still won't survive, or it has some maladaptive degenerative disease that will not let the baby survive, then you give the baby care until you decide to pull away the care or let it die or whatever. It's basically palliative care for a newborn, just like old people. It's like, you're gonna die and we can make you comfortable until you die. That's all that's about. And it's giving women that option. That's what that's about. It's not about killing babies after they're born, regular, full, healthy babies, and killing them and figuring it out afterwards. Obviously, if a woman had a botched abortion and the baby is 100% healthy and can live and survive without her, then obviously they will probably just put that baby up for adoption if that woman full-blown refused to have it. There's no reason to kill a fucking fully healthy baby. That's not a thing. And I don't know why Tim refused to explain that. That's ridiculous. I can't even believe he did that, bro. I'm so upset. Y'all, Sean Diddy Combs hit with a wave of 120 new sexual assault allegations. That's crazy. Finna mute myself so I can check up on some stuff.
The vote. It's as American as apple pie. It's iconic.
Got the flag up.
Patriotic. The vote is as American as you. This November, step into the box and make it stick. Vote her up.
Get the latest updates on the 2024 election on the NBC News app.
We are back now with tonight's vice presidential debate.
When it ends, join us for analysis. Now, back to the debate.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced back, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence.
That's true.
And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that. And
these niggas is playing so nice with each other.
It is awful. And
they
I
are really playing nice with each other.
About Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety.
Wait, he said I've become friends with school shooters.
My shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today.
That was a terrible
and
misspeak.
Several things I want to mention on this is.
That was a terrible misspeak.
Talking about cities and where it's at.
I became friends with school shooters.
Where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides.
Parents.
And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves.
That was bad.
And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful.
That was bad.
This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this, this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said
immediate
something
relief
I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where? Yeah.
Can I have it?
We'll get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again,
he's not letting anybody in.
Check, I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up.
Nobody's saying
Senator,
that.
on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop.
Why is Trump tweeting in the middle of the debate?
Things and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry.
Very quickly.
I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local. Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, At the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think it's Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress. You're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill,
I'm having a ball on Twitter right now, y'all. If you ain't following, follow on Twitter.
He actually implemented some of these regulations.
OGIX underscore on Twitter.
And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done, but when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my
bro,
kid
I ain't even see you sliding here. What's up, bro?
But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept.
This is a debate.
Because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible.
Because I'm sitting here like, damn, if I really didn't know what was going on,
what they're saying is, if you're healthy,
have a little bit more
why
insight,
should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure.
Especially for how he's been in the media. He's been terrible in the media.
They're figuring they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions. Or
they is doubling back on these questions.
Look, we currently have laws and regulations in the place
right
now that protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Not to let nobody
we want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is... So you
think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret.
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret.
Let's talk about families in America.
Let's talk about families.
There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you.
Okay.
How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
How long?
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress works. But here's what the deal is.
Fair.
Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company.
Fair.
Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids.
Yeah, now you want to make up for how you threw your wife under the bus when people ask you about it.
And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective.
She actually
for her access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company, but the cultural pressure on young families,
shout out to the 5 in here.
Women, I think makes it really
even though y'all not in the chat communicating with a nigga.
A lot of young women would
shout
like
out
to go
to
back
y'all.
to work
This 5 has been held and strong
since
I came back from
after the commercial break. With the kids, we should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care of their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in.
It was a nonsensical
President
statement.
Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described. You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas.
He got to run he got to hold so much water for Trump.
Who employ slave labor
run defense
and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan.
Biden being
cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America. But penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Because he's getting old, just like Biden.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
It won't.
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that plays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not here. When I go to businesses,
because
sure,
the tariffs is just adding on to what you're paying for.
They will lead with child care and they will lead with housing.
Cheaper for
because
you.
we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota,
it's not going to make
we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. What President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation.
At a debate after fucking 3 months of ruining Trump's campaign.
Anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by 2 lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think
Walz.
we need to tell the story.
Serve it up.
Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he did. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all,
can't answer that.
It's really rich for Democratic
6th.
leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We're going to shake hands after this debate and after this election.
You can't act like January 6th
I hope that we'll win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
It's never happened until Trump.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation.
They're trying to out-nice guy each other, and it's
there's
annoying.
a lot of agreement, but this is one that we
They keep trying to out-nice guy each other.
This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater.
Are we forgetting that Donald Trump tried to fucking sue or kick off John Legend's wife for calling him a pussy-ass bitch or something?
Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there.
I don't run Facebook. Facebook can do what the fuck they want.
I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office even if the president doesn't. And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News Vice Presidential
Damn,
debate
it's not
continues.
over, bro. This is only be an hour and a half, I thought. Jesus Christ. This shit not over. Okay, so here we go. All right, y'all. So I know y'all in here, even though y'all not talking. It's all good. So far, this is what I think. I think that J.D. Vance optically is doing better than Tim Walz. Tim Walz has more substance and facts behind him, but he is not portraying them in the correct fashion. I think that he fucked up immensely by not answering that abortion question where he could have made Vance look stupid. It is not too much for laymen to understand what the whole 9-month abortion is. It's not a 9-month abortion. That's not what it is. I explained it earlier in this stream. I'm not going to repeat it unless somebody needs me to. But he should have explained that. J.D. Vance is doing good. Like, it's so surprising because J.D. Vance has been doing nothing but bringing down Trump's campaign. But I'm also going to say this because when this is over, since it's going on longer than I anticipated, I'm going to say it right now. When this goes off, all the Republicans are going to act like, oh, this matters so much. Trump, Republican / conservative / MAGA, all that shit. They're going to be like, oh, God, this is so great. Trump is going to win. J.D. Vance went crazy. J.D. Vance did so good. Oh, yeah, J.D. Vance, suck me, luck me, kick me, suck me, fuck me. They're going to do all that shit. And they're going to be like, yes, we're winning because J.D. Vance stumped Walz in this debate. And Democrats and left-leaners and lefties and tankies are gonna not tankies. Lefties are gonna be like, J.D. Vance did better than we expected. Tim Walz, he let us down a little bit, and we're gonna be objective, and they're gonna act like J.D. Vance is the second fucking coming, and I mean that in both ways. So they're gonna do all that. We're gonna be the people on the left are gonna be objective. And is going to be like, well, yeah, we agree on that. Like, J.D. Vance isn't some master manipulator. Tim Walz didn't do great. He didn't do terrible, but he's going to do okay. Rasta, I didn't know you were still here, bro. And they're going to be objective about it for the most part. There's going to be some that's going to act like Tim Walz wiped the floor with him, which isn't true. Tim Walz is doing okay. I'm not impressed at all. He's letting me down. Tim Walz is letting me down. I'm upset because he's a good speaker, but clearly he's not a good debater. J.D. Vance is a good debater. Tim Walz has more objectively better facts on his side than Tim Walz, but they're not getting relayed in the best way. So optically, J.D. Vance is doing better. Factually, the facts is just never on conservative sides because they lie about every fucking thing. I gotta piss. I'll be back. Shit, ain't no sound. Sorry.
With our stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people.
I'm guessing these is like
they believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy.
All they've been talking about is fear. They haven't been talking about
the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate
Tim Walz
this
side.
election
Blue,
cycle.
left, right as far as who we saw
and
debating.
A reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out
as far
and
as
vote,
who you
and
saw
for all of us
debating.
here at CBS News, thank you.
But to be honest, this was a really good debate. It's hard to decide a winner. It's extremely hard to decide who won this debate. I don't know who won.
And
I
that's
can't
the
say
end.
who
Tim
won.
Walz, J.D. Vance squaring off for about 90 minutes in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, the CBS News studios, as their families come out to greet them after what was really a quite civilized
They both
debate.
had highlights.
And perhaps that's one of the
They
headlines
both had
we'll talk about as we
downsides.
turn to meet the press moderator, Kristen Welker, and Hallie Jackson, our
That's what
senior
makes
Washington
everything
correspondent.
funny.
Lester here, still with me in New York City.
Yeah,
I
the
really
older
am
guy.
struck.
Yep.
We had kind of like a good
He's 40.
old-fashioned policy
I believe he's
debate
60.
on the issues. Didn't get nasty.
20 years
didn't
since
get-
You're still chatting.
Still chatting. Didn't get weird. You know, they took their shots, but it was earnest, and there were even moments of kind of congeniality.
They both was
and
trying to be
collegiality.
Mr. Nice
There
Guy.
were a number of moments where each of the candidates turned to each other and said, I agree with you. When Governor Walz said that his child had witnessed a shooting, you heard Senator Vance say, I'm so sorry that that happened. Look, zooming out, it was clear, I think, that Senator J.D. Vance knew his challenge tonight was to come off as more likable. I received a number of texts from Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, everybody
who say
knows
he was
J.D.
very
Vance was not
effective at
likable.
doing that. He's coming off
He
as
did do a good
normal,
job.
even
J.D. Vance
compassionate,
did do
even
a
on the
good
issue
job
of
at that.
abortion and economy.
J.D. Vance did a
one
good job
Democrat
at
said to me.
coming off
And
more
then,
likable.
at the end of the night, something very significant happened, which is that Governor Walz turned to Senator Vance and said, did Trump lose the 2020 election? Vance said, I'm focused on the future. Walz said, that's a damning answer. I do think
he said
that
it's a damning non-answer.
Non-answer. And I do think that exchange and non-answer will in some ways loom very large over what Democrats and Republicans agree
couldn't even say he
was
lost
a strong
he
night
couldn't say
for
he lost
Senator
the
Vance.
Hallie, what was the most memorable moment for you?
I think there were a few of them. I think the one that Kristen mentions is one of them. I think the idea that the mics were not muted at one point and then muted, and Senator Vance taking exception to that. Governor Walz calling himself kind of a knucklehead when asked to speak about an instance in which he says he misspoke about China, and an answer that was tough to follow there. I think overall, I was, like you, Lester, watching the two of them interact at the end there, because there was this sense of did not see on that debate stage between the people at the top of the ticket here. What was also interesting here is the way that Senator Vance very specifically and repeatedly linked Kamala Harris to Tim Walz. Both of them seemed very clear that they know what this is about, right? This is about the principles. This isn't necessarily
Even
about
at the end, they both said, vote for Kamala Harris.
That's
vote
exactly
for Donald
right.
Trump,
And
not
on the
vote
other
for
side,
me.
too. I mean, J.D. Vance said Kamala Harris's name 38 times. That is way more than Donald Trump ever said Kamala Harris's name.
A lot of people don't really know who these two men are.
Yeah, that's right. We talk about this being an introduction to America. You heard a lot of policy. You heard some substance there, too. So you probably have some level of takeaway if you ended up watching for the full 90 minutes. But I do think that as things move forward, I had one Democrat text me, listen, substantive, but also can't imagine this changes a whole lot in the race moving forward.
And I think the biography is important. That's why you heard both of them pause at various moments throughout the night to reintroduce themselves to Americans, to explain where they had come from, the fact that they both have served in the military, and to try to really paint themselves as people who can relate to moderates, to independents, to those suburban voters who are going to
The closing moments, the closing arguments are always so interesting, because that's the only thing they get to plan, rehearse, memorize if they want to. And they both struck a note of optimism about the future in the country. And with J.D. Vance, frankly, it was a stark contrast to what we hear from Donald Trump, who says this country is going to H-E double toothpicks, it's all terrible.
You can say the word.
Okay, hell, sorry. I didn't know if my kids were still awake. But, it was interesting to see him strike that tone, because it's in contrast to what we hear from Donald Trump every day.
And he himself, just over the weekend, said, yeah, this is a dark speech. I know that I'm giving a dark speech.
Donald Trump did
at a campaign rally he was at. He understands that is the tone he's striking, and it was markedly different.
All right, let's see what other folks are thinking about what we've just witnessed. Kate Snow has been talking to a group of voters in battleground Pennsylvania. Kate, what's the consensus? What are you hearing?
That was a good
Lester,
debate,
it's really
man.
interesting. We've just been chatting since the debate ended. We are in Pennsylvania, right, guys? And we talked about how you feel the pressure that this is a swing area and that you could actually decide this election. So, Brian, let me start with you, because you were really torn going in before the debate. You talked about not knowing exactly what you want to do. How are you feeling now?
He's unchanged.
I feel like Walz probably hit it on the head a lot of times. It's probably 60-40.
60-40 for Harris?
For Harris, yeah. I feel like Vance sort of danced around a lot of questions. It's not really going to... The vice president debate is really not going to have any kind of...
The difference is the most memorable,
meaning on how
the worst.
but
the worst
As you sit here now, do you have more
moments
certainty about how you're gonna vote, or not
Walz
no, not really.
were less impactful than
but
Vance's
I do
worst
think
moments.
that Walz
That's how I feel.
sort of.
What races?
What
you mean? What's the?
He was really
I'm
for the
assuming that's a
people,
typo.
right?
What you mean though?
And Vance
Lester.
did a lot of
What's
deflecting.
I'm assuming that's
and
a typo.
a lot of he just really wasn't sure. He kind of danced around answers. So.
When Walz
Brandon, you said you felt like Vance was
wasn't
just
as
saying
vital
that
as when
what were your
Vance
words? He was
floundered.
saying things that people wanted to hear?
It sounded like he was saying things that people wanted to hear. He sounds like he was trying to be more human. This does not necessarily align to what he said before, in my opinion.
And you said that now you are feeling a little more certain about going with Harris. Am I reading that right?
Yes, now it's October 1st. I think it's irresponsible to have this much uncertainty coming out of either side. Vance did nothing. He did not answer the question for me. And he made a lot of connections that weren't really there. They weren't really there for me.
Claire, we were talking a lot
so like, if you
afterwards
understand
about
what's happening,
childcare.
Vance
Because there was that whole
didn't
section
do
toward the
good
end of
as
the
far as
debate
substance.
about childcare, and you're really involved in this as a member of the community here. You're a mom. You're involved in policy discussions. What's your take on that?
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for NBC for having us. But I was really interested in just like, again, I feel like we're looking at two men telling like us what women are going to do, and I'm still not there. You know, I still feel like we need more representation. We need more of who
Walz
I want to
is not
see. We
telling
need more
women
people
what
who
to
can
do.
break down systemic differences that stop our government for either party being able to
I don't know what you're
make
referring to
effective
there.
policy. So
Last
after
panel,
tonight, I
Lester
still
Wallace.
feel like a little
Lester Wallace
unwary
sounded
about
somebody
exactly
off
who
a
I will
TV
be
show.
voting for, and if I will be voting at all.
I don't know
You
who
will be
you're
voting at
referring
all.
to.
Oh, you know, I'm sure both of those men would have said, please vote if you can.
Yeah, because
John,
why you?
Just want to add to that point, you know, again, we have two men discussing.
No, you don't
issues
have two
that
men
have to do with
discussing
rights and whatnot.
Tim Walz is
But let's
saying
not
let
forget
women
that the person
decide.
at the top
Vance is
and
saying
ticket
let
for
the
the
states
Democrats
decide what
is
women
a
do.
woman, and she has a lot to
Walz
say,
is saying let the women
which maybe
decide.
that
No,
will
no,
help.
that's not what's
and we
happening,
know that
bro.
you support Harris, John. I know quickly
That's
you
not
also
what's
said
happening, bro.
the economy, the
You don't have
economic
two men
plans that you
deciding
heard
on women's
tonight
bodies
cost
and they're
a lot more than you
VPs.
expected.
Yeah, I was surprised
They're
to
not
hear
making the
the
decision.
price number that the Wharton School of Business attributed to Kamala's plan, but then when I heard that Trump's plan was 3 times that, I was pretty much shocked with that number.
Rona, you were considering voting for Trump now?
I didn't learn anything in this debate that kind of helped me reach a conclusion. I was really happy with both of their answers about Israel at the very beginning. But I had a crazy day today. I started this morning interviewing Aviva Siegel, former hostage whose husband, Keith Siegel, an American, is still held hostage in Gaza, along with another 6 Americans. And over. No one addressed that at all. No one addressed rising anti-Semitism on college campuses. I have more homework to do. Thanks.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you all so much for sitting with us and for watching. Lester, I'll send it back to you guys.
Fascinating, Kate. Enjoyed the conversation.
All right, let's go back to Tom Yamas. He's in the spin room. Have you been spun, Tom?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the spinning is just starting. The room is also starting to fill up now. I'm just looking over my shoulder to see who's here of the surrogates. We have Senator Tom Cotton is here, Representative Elise Stefanik, Governor Pritzker of Illinois, Senator Mark Kelly, and others. It sounds like we're also hearing our first sort of post-debate strategies. The Republicans are leaning into that moment that Hallie was talking about earlier, where Governor Walz was asked about his comments that were misleading about his time in China during the Tiananmen Square protest.
understand that shit. I don't understand what that was.
Republicans are
But
going
that's
very
also
hard
less
over
relevant.
that. Democrats, in turn, are saying that the lies that the Vance campaign and the Trump campaign say are nowhere in comparison to that. We're also hearing a bigger debate right now about immigration. It sounds like both sides
Who had
are fighting
glasses,
over
though? The
immigration.
guy on the left name
what
is
Vance
J.D.
said
Vance.
and what Walz said about their immigration plans, and
I
who's to
don't know
blame over the
why he had
immigration
glasses.
crisis right now at the border and how it's changing. So I think we're sort of getting our first salvos in the war
panels.
post-debate
Oh, you
and
talking
what
about
we're hearing here in the spin
panel.
room. I
Those
also want to note
people
we do see
are
Secret Service in
different
here,
from
which
both,
leads
though.
us to believe that at least one of the two candidates who debated tonight will enter the spin room and hopefully do some interviews once they get done speaking to their own campaigns. For now, I'm going to send it to you guys as the spinning is just getting started.
All right, thank you so much, Tom. I want to turn
are
now
you
to
talking about
Kristen
this
Welker,
guy?
Holly Jackson,
This
and Peter
Lester
Alexander
Wallace?
join the table.
Is
Let's
it-
get
I don't
some
know if
final
that's his name.
thoughts. Peter, you're writing your story for the Today Show tomorrow. You literally are writing your story for the Today
right.
Show tomorrow. But what's the headline to you?
Well, I think one of the biggest headlines, at least in the eyes of the Walz campaign, came in the 90th minute. It was the most contentious moment of the debate. It was on the topic of democracy, an issue that Joe Biden focused so much attention on, but it seemed to be by the wayside as it became a Trump versus Harris race right now, according to the people I'm speaking to in the Harris-Walz camp right now. They say they're dial groups, the folks who say if they like something or don't like it, thought that was the worst moment for J.D. Vance. They didn't like his non-answer, his refusal to say whether, in fact, Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in 2020 right now.
And it was towards the end, so they're going to remember it.
Right now, we're already seeing what the Trump people are trying to make hay out of. It was a gaffe by Tim Walz, who himself said sometimes he has a tendency to misspeak tonight when he said that he's friends with school shooters. He meant to say, of course, he's friends with school shooting victims. But I do think that's a key moment, and certainly I think it's a moment where they think after a night where, in the eyes of the Walz folks, they think he came off. Vance came off a bit slick tonight, Yale educated. They thought that their guy, Walz, was a bit more plain spoken along the way. Again, I go back to where I started on this, though.
Yeah, I'm assuming
he how you viewed what happened tonight, but it's how these are diced and sliced and how people see little moments from this tonight.
Yeah, what will people be talking about a few days from now?
Exactly
a few days, people are going to be talking about.
Well, I do think that democracy thing is something that the Harris and Walz folks are going to try to lay into heavy out of this. They think it was their best moment over the course of
But what about, let's talk about Walz's worst moment, which has to be, I would think,
friends
the
with
part
school
where
shooters
he was
an
asked about
obvious
misstatements he's made about
There's
whether
no
or
way
not
you can
he was at
interpret
Tiananmen
that any
Square
other
in
way
China.
besides a misspeak.
And he was sort of all over the place. Instead of just saying, look, I misspoke, and are we really talking about this thing that happened 35 years ago? So but this is the kind of things that stick from debates like this. He said, I'm a knucklehead.
Absolutely. And Democrats reached out to say that was not a strong moment.
Yeah,
it's worth
that was
noting
terrible. I didn't even know what the fuck that situation was, but it looked bad.
Each other for being the incumbent. Remember, voters are looking for change.
Show of hands, who thinks there's going to be another debate? Nobody. What about you, Lester?
Nobody clearly won that.
A chance that they're going to feel they need it.
We've covered Donald Trump for a long time. There's always a chance, but right now it doesn't look like it.
Well, that concludes our coverage of tonight's vice presidential debate.
We will have more coverage ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now. Full wrap up tomorrow on Today.
Nobody clearly won that debate. Appreciate you, Rasta. You was in this bitch whole time for pretty much.
Hey, good evening. I'm Tom Yamas. Our coverage.
I'm not gonna do that.
Of the first and only vice presidential debate.
Yeah, man. But if you ask me, there was no clear winner. There was no absolute clear winner in that shit. J.D. Vance, his biggest fuck up. Well, J.D. Vance's highlight was pressing Tim on explaining what the 9-month abortion stuff was about. And his worst moment was not admitting to the 2020 election loss. Tim Walz's highlight is asking him about the 2020 election loss, which he didn't answer. And his lowest point was not explaining the 9-month abortion shit, which I don't even know if that's low, because I don't even know if the average Republican/conservative believes that people are walking into facilities asking for a 9-month abortion just because. I don't know. I don't even know if any American believes that. And it seems like politicians use that as like a tool to wield against people on the left when nobody is walking into a fucking clinic saying, yeah, I don't want this baby anymore. Take it out at 9 months. There's no woman that's actually doing that out of choice. That's not a thing. So I don't even know if that's really resonating with anybody, but Tim not explaining that was bad in my opinion. But if that's not what stick to people, then what's going to stick is him, I guess, misspeaking on saying that I'm friends with school shooters. That was a terrible, that's probably one of the worst misspeaks you could ever have. If you have to put misspeaks in tiers, that was one of the worst. But it was obviously a misspeak, so we'll see how much the right tries to harp on that and try to act like that was a Freudian slip. Like, they're going to probably try to act like that he really meant that he's friends with. I wouldn't even hold that against Trump or Vance. Like, I'm friends with school shooters. I think it's unreasonable to think that that wasn't a misspeak, but we'll see what happens. That was a good debate. It was better than the first. Kamala wiped Trump with the first. people on the left and the right both agree that this debate isn't going to make a big difference because they're the VPs. But also, I think people need to realize that the VP is who's next in line if the person is incapable of being president at that point in time. To be completely 100% honest, Trump is closer to death than he is the life he's lived. There's a real possibility that of natural causes, Trump could not be with us for his entire term. With that being said, conservatives, Republicans, MAGA, are you okay with J.D. Vance being your president? I don't know if I am. I'm not even against young presidents, but I'm against J.D. Vance because J.D. Vance is an idiot. I'm sorry, like he's still an idiot. He performed great in this debate. You can perform great in a debate and not have all your faculties as far as legislation and politics. J.D. Vance handled this debate way better than I expected. He handled it well. The debate was the best since the Obama years. Yeah, bro, I don't even disagree. This was a good debate. And I understand the strategy, but even the fact that they did it well, the whole being cordial with one another, and I agree with my opponent, and I agree with my opponent, and my opponent is right. Like, they was doing all that shit. I'm not even mad at that shit. Like, that was just good debate tactics, which I think it worked to the casual watcher or the undecided, I think. But I think if you're more in tune with what's happening, Vance bullshitted his way through most of this. Tim Walz really floundered on not explaining that abortion shit. He floundered on immigration because that's the biggest thing that the right has on the left is the immigration shit. It was just like, bro, they had a pat off at the end. They kept patting each other on the back. No. Yeah, no. I peeped it. I saw it. They was really like, they respected one another. It was a lot of respect, even if you don't like that guy, which I think it's hard. I don't know J.D. Vance, but I think it's hard to dislike Tim Walz as a human being. I think it's hard. J.D. Vance has come off unlikable, but he performed well in this goddamn debate. So I think they respected one another for sure. They was like, I don't give a fuck how I feel about you. You did your thing tonight. That's what I saw. I saw that. I saw the excessive pats is like, man, respect. Even for white folk, clearly. Because they was like, I respect what the fuck you just did, bro. They definitely did. I peeped it, bro. So, yeah, we gonna see. I don't know if you was here. Okay, I don't know if you was here when I said what I think is going to happen from this point is the left is going to admit that J.D. Vance did better than expected. That's what's going to be the worst. I don't think you can be objective and say, that J.D. Vance was terrible. Objectively, he was not terrible. Objectively, at bare minimum, he did better than you expected. At best, he performed well. Tim Walz, at worst was unprepared and did bad. At best he's better speaking off the cuff and could have done better. There's no clear winner in this, like I said, at all. But I think the right is going to run with this and act like Trump should be president because J.D. Vance performed better than expected for this debate. And the left is going to say that Tim Walz did okay. I don't think you're going to find any person on the left that's saying that say Tim Walz wiped the floor with him or won. They're gonna say he spoke well, but like, yeah. Vance did lie. He did lie. I didn't catch. I tried to. At a point, I kind of didn't. But when I was trying to fact check what I could. J.D. Vance was lying. Walz didn't lie. From what I checked even I wasn't sure. I didn't believe Tim Walz when he said that Texas is surpassing the maternal mortality rate in Texas was skyrocketing. It's up 56% after Roe v. Wade got turned. That was true. And that was the only thing I fact checked Tim on, it was true. When I fact checked Vance, he was lying. So that is on the Democrat side, but the people on the right not even gonna go check that shit. They're not gonna. They don't want to see that there are people lying, and they don't want to see that people on the left is telling the truth. I'm not even saying Tim Walz never lied. I just never saw him say anything that was egregious. It could be bias in there, maybe, but yeah, I didn't see nothing egregious. Again, the Republicans are egregious liars, which is my issue. Like, we know politicians lie, but when you lie egregiously, it's like, what the fuck is we doing now, bro? I don't think Walz did bad. He just had a bad moments. I think JD did better. Might have had the worst moment at the end with the election thing. Yeah, I think if there was a worst all night, it was the election thing. The worst thing of the night was not admitting that Trump lost. I cannot get over Walz not answering the abortion thing because it's not hard for regular people to understand. And he didn't answer it, and if it's either because of ignorance or the assumption that the regular American folk couldn't understand. And I don't want to give myself too much credit that it's like, oh, I can understand it, everybody can. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't know that maybe most Americans can't, but I don't think that the concept of that whole 9-month abortion, which is not a 9-month abortion thing, is hard to understand, which is why I feel like he should have explained what the fuck it was. And if he couldn't, it's very upsetting if Tim Walz don't understand what the fuck it was. That I'm not okay with that because you're the one signing this shit. I'm sorry I sound like this. But yeah, I think the worst thing is that stood out. Him not admitting that Trump lost is bad, but he had to because Trump reneged on admitting that he lost. He admitted that he lost at one point. He was like, yeah, we lost by a hair. And then when he got confronted about it at the debate where they said, well, you said you lost by a hair. Is that how you feel? Like, do you accept that you lost in 2020? He's like, no, I was being sarcastic. Bro, you was not being sarcastic. David Muir shouldn't have put his opinion in like, yeah, I don't think you were being sarcastic. He shouldn't have done that. That wasn't okay. He should not have done that. David Muir should not have been like, that wasn't sarcasm. I don't think it was like he shouldn't have done that. But it wasn't sarcasm in what he said. He answered low-key. He just said they talked about it on other debate and it's not true. Wait, he just said they talked about it in the other debate and it's not true what JD said. The average American not going to think that's a bad answer. Do you think the average American not going to say it, or do you think that MAGA's not going to say it's a bad answer? I think the average American, that if you're on the left, of course it was bad. If you're on the right, it probably didn't face you at all. But what about the people that don't know? What about the people that legitimately don't know what to do and really considering how bad J6 was and how Trump reacted? What if you know about J6, but you don't have every single fact in front of you, and you hear people say, did Trump lose? And then, like, because I don't think the average, if you undecided, you don't think that Trump's allegations was legitimate. You don't think that he literally felt like if you undecided, but you don't feel like the election was stolen at this point. If you're legitimately undecided, I don't get being undecided at this point, but if you legitimately are undecided, because the people that's voting for Kamala ain't gonna change off this. He was voting for Trump, not gonna change off this. Because J.D. Vance did good for his base. Like, he did. Ain't nobody flipping off this. Ain't nobody flipping from this debate for sure. I think if anybody flipped, it was from the last one. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. He answered it. He just said they talked about it in the debate. It's not. I got to reread it. He answered it. He just said they talked about it in the other debate, and it's not true what J.D. said. The average American. Oh, okay. I think I agree. But I guess maybe because if I have more information, which I do think most Americans don't understand that concept, I agree with you on that front, because the complexity of that is it's a little bit more nuanced than the whole did you lose the election. So I agree, because I don't think, like you said, I don't think the average person thinks women are going to ask for a 9-month abortion just because. Like, I don't think nobody believes that that's a thing. It doesn't make sense. No matter, I don't care how partisan you are. You don't think people want abortion optionally at 9 months. That's just not a thing. Is it even fucking 0.1% of people? Is it? I don't believe it is. So It was a bad look simply because I guess maybe I just wanted Walz to present himself in the best possible way possible. And he did not do that. So it bothers me because that was an easy dunk. It was so easy. It was so easy. It was so easy to not let people think that people are getting 9-month abortions optionally. You just want people that need it to have that ability. That's why I don't even understand how Trump is like, everybody wanted it to the states, let the states decide. No, deciding is if you want it or not. Don't let people that need it or want it at fucking X amount of weeks not have that option. That's the problem. Don't let states tell people they can't get it because they found out they was pregnant at 23 weeks but didn't know. Because women can fucking have birth and not know they pregnant. It's a thing. It's fucking rare, but it's a thing. So if you could fucking deliver a child and not know that you're pregnant, you can find out that you're pregnant at 23 weeks. And nobody wants to talk about the consciousness debate about having children. This politics shit is hilarious. Look what they doing. Look what they doing. He out getting pizza.
The big floppy, right. And you better get a big floppy slice, right? The double, for me, I have flashbacks to Cazzolis.
I don't like this.
That's what the 80s went to a mall.
Because all that's doing is I don't like giving the right ammunition to attack the left. It's like, let's show Tim Walz being a fucking human. But are they going to show J.D. Vance be a human? Because I don't like that. Because now the right going to be like, look, after the debate, they showed Tim Walz getting a slice of pizza. And it's going to be like, oh, God. Can't believe J.D. didn't duck on Walz for talking about unemployment during his presidency when it was because of the lockdown led by Democrats. I would have cooked.
Vance was a much better performer. I think we knew that going in.
This
is pretty much what he's done his adult life, is talk and debate, right?
Yeah.
A lot of other experiences, and I say this with.
Let me read it. He's talking too much. Can't believe JD didn't dunk on Walz talking about unemployment. Yeah, I don't even know why he would bring that up because I haven't heard nobody on the left even bring that up. Because obviously the inflation, the thing is the right and the left piss me off with this. They talk about the employment rates. Granted, the Biden administration created more jobs even outside of COVID. But when they talk about unemployment for COVID times, when they talk about inflation going up, which now inflation has consistently gone down coming out of COVID, both of them are disingenuous with that information. They act like Trump created the greatest economy on earth when he inherited Obama's. They act like Obama didn't give Trump a decent, thriving economy, that he did nothing to besides give tax write-off to the rich, and then mishandle COVID. He didn't cause it, but he mishandled COVID. Then he put us in that bullshit. Biden had to come in and fix it, and Biden was one of the most effective presidents with a fucking one term. Biden did a lot, and he cut down the inflation in half. Inflation was cut in half in his 4 years. Inflation got cut in half, but of course it went up coming out of COVID. I think that was unavoidable. There was no way to avoid the inflation out of COVID, which can be argued to be Trump's fault.
Which is interesting.
The real issues with COVID. But they should attack the honest, like you said, they should attack what you can attack him on. But I do think Walz and Vance had a little bit more of an honest debate than Kamala and Trump.
As of course, Governor Walz has just
it sounds terrible, man.
Late night slice of pizza. I think here in Midtown, New York Pizza, not too far from where we are. To pick up on Chuck's point, I was struck, Peter, by Jen Psaki, somebody who you know well from covering the White House, former, of course, White House staffer, former campaign staffer.
She said just this.
Exactly, that she believes that they are doing a disservice to
Obama giving that tax cut out to rich by not getting him out more when he was the guy, take credit because he did the same.
Who came up with the whole weird attack doing one of these cable news interviews on.
But even with Obama, if he didn't only do that. That's not all he did. You know what I'm saying? Even with Medicare, I'm sorry I sound like this, bro. Medicare. Some people hated it, but some people needed it. You feel me? Like, damn, bro, my contacts fuck with me. I'm fucked up. Obama didn't just get in office, sit on his hands, and give the rich people tax cuts. That's not all he did.
None of that really
So,
matters, though, at the end of the day. This was the high water mark for both of these candidates. Tomorrow, the conversation.
Even if you want to argue, even if I granted the argument that that Obama gave the rich tax write-offs, Trump continued what Obama did, which even if it helped the economy, it was taking. Okay, yeah. Yeah, but even if I grant that, Trump didn't do nothing but that for him to take credit for doing so much, and it was so thriving, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, well, is it all is just keep giving the rich tax write-off? Is that it? Because everybody else hurting. Because that's why the middle class feels so left out and unheard and fucked. Because I know that's me. I felt unheard. I know the child tax credit helped me. I know that for a fact. Everybody's mad at the inflation, but nobody was mad when they got their stimulus check. And not only that, Trump gave 2 out of the 3. Biden gave 1. Is there people might want to say, well, Biden's was the worst, and it's like, well, of course, if you lean right, you're gonna say that. If you lean left, you're gonna say you needed it. Who's right? We don't know, but all we can say is we do know that Trump mishandled COVID, and Biden had to fix it. I will be honest. I can't say because I was only 18 when Obama got in. I was still in college. I don't know what that felt like. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not gonna say. And I'm not arguing that the middle class thrived under Obama. What I'm saying is that Kamala seems to realize they've been left out and wants to change it. That's what I'm arguing. I'm not arguing that Obama helped the middle class. You feel me? So I think that maybe Kamala has, like, the middle class has been getting fucked for even fucking, you could say 12 years. You could say the middle class has been getting fucked over for 12 years, and maybe Kamala recognized that because that's her background, and now she wants to fix it. That could be an argument. I'm not arguing that Obama helped the middle class. The middle class has been terrible under multiple administrations. Bush, yeah, Bush Jr. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, y'all say 18 years. You could argue the middle class been fucked for 18 years. Well, if we want to get to it, I mean, it could have been fucking Bush's fault with the fucking housing market fucking us over. You could argue that it started with that. You could argue that. I'm not going to argue that. I was 18. I didn't give a fuck about none of that. I voted for Obama because he was black. That's me being honest. I was one of the people. I'm 18. I could vote. My first time voting was for Obama because I could legally vote. I voted for Obama because he was black. That's what I was on at 18. Retrospectively, I think people look for perfection out of presidents. Obama wasn't perfect, but I do think he was good. I don't change the fact that I think Obama overall was a net good for the economy. Trump was like, I don't know if he did anything. I can't say if he was good or bad during his term. What I will say is he showed his ass when he lost, which is why he should never be a president again. I think once he lost for his second run, he showed me enough that he should not be president ever again. Biden was extremely effective towards pushing the economy during his one term. Both was, yeah, but he said we both. I was young. House crisis was around that time. As a middle class, I can imagine that the middle class was fucked at that time. Both for Obama because he's black, man. As a neoliberal, all in all, Biden has actually been more progressive president, even though this war shit. But yeah, I think we agree on that. Biden, that's what I'm saying. Like, Biden's progressive. He's the good progressive. He's not overly progressive. I don't know if you identify as like a full blown progressive. I don't know if you fuck with like Bernie and shit. You know what I'm saying? But I think Bernie's a little too it. I'm not even saying Bernie's like wrong. I just don't know if it's realistic at this point in time. Just like the far right. I think Bernie's far left. I think he's far left.
Standing up for the freedom of women to make their own decisions on their health care, and J.D. Vance doubling down on Donald Trump's position,
Biden was good. I don't know why the right. I think the right holds Biden against having to fix COVID, which is fucked up. Biden was trying to be president half his damn life, and when he got in, he did a lot in 4 years. And I think it's unfair how people try to treat Biden on the left and the right. I think it's unfair how they treat Biden. It's not fair how they treat Biden on both sides. Biden was extremely effective. People feel all of this inflation and shit because of COVID. We can't say what Biden would have did if he didn't have to walk into a mess. George Bush Jr. caused the fucking housing market. He didn't have to walk into that. He caused the shit. So that's that. Obama fixed it for fucking half his term and then tried to help shit after he done fixing shit. So yeah, I don't understand this. I need to look into this thing. I don't understand what this question was about Tim Walz. I don't understand it.
China during the democracy protest went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
So the question was about comments he's made twice now about saying that he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square protest. He was not. He acknowledged that. But this is the third or fourth time he said something that hasn't been true or it's been an exaggeration. Does Governor Walz have a problem with the truth?
No. This was a mistake. He was there that year. It was a few months off. And, of course, there was
I'm not mad at anybody that fuck with Bernie. I just think it's more ideal than we could obtain at the point in time.
And so what I look at it is he made an error. He admitted he made an error, unlike Donald Trump, who wouldn't even admit that Joe Biden won the election. That's a pretty different thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Then goes on, in an incredible way to serve our country, to be our governor. So I just don't see this. It's nothing but an error. Everyone makes mistakes.
Do you think
and
we'll see
what's
more of
most
these,
important to me is not if you make one mistake about a few months off, but if you are unwilling, as J.D. Vance was, to admit the results
Amy
of
doing
an
her
election.
job,
what does that mean for our democracy going forward?
She's doing
that
her
was quite
job.
the moment at the end of the debate. I do want to ask you about the issue of abortion, because it came a lot during this debate. It was one of the most talked about issues. Here was a moment for Governor Walz. Let's listen.
Okay. Fuck, I want to talk about that.
The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography?
Do Democrats believe the issue of abortion care is going to make or break this election?
I agree, because Bernie's base is big. Whether anybody wants to accept it or not, you need Bernie. You need Bernie supporters, because then people would just sit home. Bernie bros will sit the fuck home if you don't get them.
Tim Walz's economic plan is the right way to go. Focus on child care and housing. But this is clearly part of people's freedoms. And you see it from the prairies of Kansas to a 13% in Ohio.
That's a fair point, bro. Because the Republican Party, I don't want to say Bernie would have did the same, but the Republican Party after Trump, if he loses, they have to rebuild themselves completely from the ground up. They're fucked because of how much Trump changed shit. But, there is something to be said that if Bernie could have won, what the Democrat side could have looked like. But I don't think it would have been to the point that everybody hates Bernie.
Keeping you up at night about this election.
You're right. No, I'm not mad, bro. I was voting for Biden because of how bad Trump is. I didn't care if Biden was getting wheeled out at his fucking debate. Trump is that bad to me. But I understand. I'm not mad at Bernie bros. I'm not mad at anybody that fucks with Bernie, because I think, to me, I'm more of like we got to take baby steps. Even though what Bernie be on, I actually fuck with at the end of the day. I'm not going to lie. I just, like, I was an Andrew Yang person. Like, I know we're going to need UBI at some point. We're going to need that shit. Like, the direction we're going in, we need UBI. We're going to need UBI at some point. That's why I was fucking with Andrew Yang. But it's idealistic. And I just think that if it ever is going to happen, it's going to take baby steps. And that's what I had to settle with. But I wasn't going to sit home over this debate. I sat home for Hillary and Trump.
So I've also, when I hear
Hillary and Trump, I was
Vance
sitting home, bro.
out there and won't agree to certifying
I did.
an
I mean, I
election
did sit
in
home,
minute 90,
and then I
and
only
think
voted
about what
for
we
Joe.
went through on January 6th at 3:30 in the morning.
That's what's
walking
up. You
over
fucked
that
with Yang
broken
too,
glass
yeah, bro.
to
I
finally get
was
that
fucking with
election,
Andrew Yang.
Those results certified. It was Mike Pence, me, and Roy
But
Blunt.
when
I don't wanna
Joe
go through
added
that again,
Kamala-
and I want to have a president that respects our democracy.
When Joe added Kamala, that's when I decided I was going to vote. I was, believe it or not, I'm on record. My podcast, I'm on record saying that I voted for Joe because he added Kamala. I actually liked Kamala in 2020. She didn't get out there that much, but what I saw, I liked in 2020. I was fucking with Kamala in 2020.
And that's the right thing to do.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much
Once
for
Joe
joining us.
picked her is when I decided to vote.
Yeah,
I wasn't
having
fucking with
back
Joe
to the
back
studio
then
in New
because
York.
All right, Tom,
I didn't
thank
feel
you very
like he
much. We've been
was
talking
gonna
about
do
what
shit.
voters think about what we all just watched over the course of the last 90 minutes. To find out, let's bring in our NBC News senior national correspondent Kate Snow, who watched that debate.
I sat home in
with voters,
2016
some
too,
of
bro.
whom, Kate, have
He said I
settled
was
on who they
blue.
want, some of whom
I
are
sat home too, bro.
undecided, but all
I
of
sat
them
home.
live in the,
I didn't vote. I didn't
the
vote in
great Commonwealth of
2016.
Pennsylvania. You know my home state, Kate. Talk me through what you're hearing from folks.
That's right.
I definitely did vote.
Yeah, and they all live within the confines, right around Pittsburgh, and we're in Pittsburgh right now. And I have to say, this is Allegheny County,
And
Allie, and
we
you
in
probably know
Illinois.
this, but
It didn't matter at the end of the
election, there were 25 minutes.
It didn't matter. We in Illinois.
Where the vote was
How you feel about the Electoral
5%.
College,
So,
bro? I hate it. I want them to get rid of Electoral College. I hate it. I hate it. They said I don't think any legislation has gone across anybody's desk more than the Electoral College. I've heard they've tried to my understanding, they've tried to get rid of it more than anything.
You guys were you were more unsure.
What do you think about the Electoral
And then we had
College?
two people who were really considering Donald Trump, including Brian. And Brian, I want to go to you because it's been fascinating to get your read on what happened tonight.
I'm assuming you've been younger than Joe.
Like
Facts. I don't even think Joe is incapable mentally. I think he's just optically, it don't look good for your president to be in the state that he's in. I don't think Joe has dementia. I don't think he doesn't know what's going on mentally. I think he's just getting old and he's slow as fuck. My grandma is old and slow. My grandmother is 96 years old. She has all of her mental faculties. She's just old and slow. But all of her mental faculties are in order. And I think Joe Biden's is too. It's just optically it doesn't look good. But Joe Biden mentally is fine. He's just slow and is old. And he don't need to be president. That's for certain. He don't need to be president because he's so old. But mentally he's fine. He's just old.
I would say that Tim Walz won.
I wonder, would everybody say that Walz
Chicago,
won this debate? A show of
city,
hands.
and it's moving right. You think so,
No
bro?
pressure. Okay.
Damn, I
Not
missed
sure,
the question.
Claire. Claire, you
I
win
don't know what it means to win a debate.
Yeah, well, that's true.
You think
That's a fair point.
you think Illinois could be a swing state?
I guess I should say. But
I'm
you
not
came
saying it
into this
can't happen.
not
10
knowing.
years
You
is a
said to
long
me
time.
A few minutes ago,
It depends
you're
on how
still not
politics
sure who
look.
you're gonna vote for. You
Depends
may
on how
not vote
politics
at
look.
all.
But I think
And I
overall,
remember
bro,
during the big section
I
of the debate
think
that was about abortion.
society in general
You
is
were
starting
having
to
some
be more
strong
progressive,
reactions
bro.
to
I
some
think
of
I don't see us going backwards.
Hard to look at two men telling
Notice that Republicans aren't winning popular votes. So I think that people in general are becoming more progressive in general, bro. I don't see us being a swing state because Chicago's the most populated for one, and people in general are going to start becoming more liberal in general. I don't think people are okay, especially with the way we look outside every day, and then we get family members that do certain things. It's hard to just be like,
does that person care about me? No,
trying to be like, yeah, people shouldn't be gay. People shouldn't get abortions. Like, when you have to deal with these real life, I think a lot of people that's conservatives don't have to, they don't experience some of these real life situations. And when more and more people start to fall into the lower and middle class, they got to deal with shit like this. And it's hard to get them to start to be right, to lean to the right.
And making our own choices. Instead, we again got handed two people, and that was our decision.
People are getting into the extremes because of the internet, but that's not most people. More people are starting to lean into the extremes, but that's not most people. Most people are kind of just They just want to chill, bro. Most people just want to be comfortable. They want their people to be comfortable, bro. I don't think most people are looking to be like, can't nobody have an abortion. And then most people aren't like, a woman should be able to get an abortion in 9 months because she wants to. That's not most people. You know what I'm saying?
And the fact that he tried to
We get a whole conversation about that, bro. We get a whole conversation about that. A lot of people have misconceptions about some liberal views on children.
Donald Trump calls the
It's misconceptions and
that have been jailed
without having the knowledge. They say a lot of bullshit, and the shit that's not bullshit is being misinterpreted. Like they'll say, oh, they're letting kids get surgery before they're 14. No, they're not. Nobody's getting surgery before 14. And if it were to ever happen, that is the most extreme case of gender dysphoria, which is already on the fucking low end of it.
Yeah, the one point I thought was telling was that J.D. Vance tried to...
Is it, bro? Tate finna be in jail. He's already fallen off. The red pill. Oh, man, we gotta talk, bro. We be on the same shit, G. We gotta talk, man. We gonna stop dodging me. We gonna have a conversation. No, I'm not saying that like insultingly. We gonna have a conversation because I don't have a lot of people to talk about this shit with, bro. And you paying attention to all the same shit, bro. Like, we gotta talk, man. We gotta set up a day and have a conversation, bro. Cause I can't do all this. You gotta type and I gotta verbally do it. I gotta go to bed so it can't be tonight. I gotta work tomorrow. But we gotta talk, man. Like, we can talk about this Tate fans. We can talk about politics. We can talk about all this shit, bro. It's so much I wanna cover, man. Yeah, like, look, you got personal experiences, bro. I work with kids too, but I work with kids too. I've been a daycare assistant, been a daycare teacher, I've been a daycare supervisor, I've been a life coach for the Boys and Girls Club. So I've worked with kindergarten to high school, bro. So we both got experience in these shits. We both got the knowledge, we both got the wisdom, we both got the experience, we both got the need to know. You know what I'm saying? We got to talk about this, but especially being two people that worked with kids, bro. I said I've been working with kids from kindergarten to high school, bro. So I've seen every phase of it, and we went to college together. You feel me? That'd be a great conversation. We got to set something up, man. We got to set it up. Yeah, I don't watch nothing but a lot of. Yeah, I don't do nothing but watch a lot of info. Same. We're gonna chop it up. Yeah, I gotta teach. Yeah. Appreciate you for sliding, bro. Appreciate you for sliding. I'm gonna hit you up. We could set up a day. We could just talk about. We could pick some topics and we'll chop it up on stream, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Have a good conversation whenever we both got time. But yeah, I'm finna get up out of here. All right. Appreciate any and everybody in the stream. If you in here watching, whether you leave a like, comment, or a sub, if not one and all three, I hope you did, especially if you at this point of the stream, you feel me? But even if not, I appreciate you for just viewing. It all matters and it means a lot to me. But till next time, y'all, let me know in the comments if you're watching this after the fact, how you felt about the debate, who you think won, highs and lows, all that shit. Make sure you catch me in the next video or live stream, whatever I do first. Probably going to catch a video from me at some point this weekend. You know what I'm saying? My weekend starts tomorrow, so just be looking out for that. But appreciate you, man. Till next time, y'all. Peace.